Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today for the Connecting the Census to Californians, the roles of nonprofits and local governments, a joint informational hearing on the Senate Select Committee on the 2020 United States Census, the Assembly Select Committee on the Census, and the Assembly Select Committee on the Nonprofit Sector. I want to thank my colleague, Assemblymember Monique Limón, who suggested that the Census Select Committees hold a hearing with the Select Committee on the Nonprofit Sector, and also thank Dr. Richard Pan for his leadership as chair of the Senate Select Committee on the 2020 United States Census. In May, the Assembly and the Senate Census Select Committees convened a joint hearing about many of the challenges for the 2020 census, including underfunding, the shift to internet data collection, cutbacks in field testing, cybersecurity concerns, and the inclusion of a citizenship question, and the possible inclusion of a citizenship question. I'll remain optimistic. The 2020 census is a top priority for the legislature, and we plan to do everything we need to ensure a complete count of all Californians. We are organizing earlier than ever before with more funding and better coordination than we've ever had. The state is investing millions of dollars for outreach and education in hard-to-count communities. The state is investing. We are looking closely with the administration, Census Director Ditas Katagi, and Government Operations Agency Secretary Maribel Batcher. The Government Operations Agency, GovOps, is the lead agency tasked with developing and implementing a comprehensive plan for the $90 million in state funds dedicated for outreach and education. I also want to recognize Deputy Secretary Kahim Morton from GovOps, who has joined us here today. Appreciate you joining us. Today's briefing will include expert testimony to help inform the state's planning efforts. Specifically, what are local, county, and city governments, nonprofits, and philanthropy doing individually and collectively to formulate plans and mobilize resources for the 2020 census in California? How can these efforts be coordinated at a local, regional, and statewide level and be integrated with the state plan? We also want to learn more about common strategies and best practices and about how local government, nonprofits, and philanthropy are already collaboratively planning together. We're also interested in hearing about strategies to avoid duplication and overlap of spending and contracting. And we want to learn what actions state government should take to be an effective census partner with local government, nonprofits, and philanthropy. We know that a one-plan-fits-all approach will not work for our diverse state, but we think it's critically important that everyone is on the same page. We will continue to have hearings to be sure that we are on track to get everyone counted in 2020. We only have one chance this decade to get this right. We have only 3 weeks left for the legislature to complete its business for the year. Accordingly, this is a very busy time with demands on legislators in all directions, so I really appreciate my colleagues who are here right now and also who will join us throughout the morning. And for those wishing to make a brief public comment at the conclusion of our panels, there's a sign-in sheet with the Sergeant-at-Arms. I'll now turn it over to the other chairs to make opening remarks. Assemblymember Limón.
Thank you. Thank you, Assemblymember Berman and Senator Pan for coming together to have this discussion. In my role as chair of the Select Committee for the Nonprofit Sector, I know that not only myself, but so many nonprofits in the state have been tracking the 2020 census closely. The conversations, the issues that have arisen from potential changes have been some that the nonprofit sector has been following closely and also attentively, trying to identify what are the best ways to move forward. I, like many of you and many colleagues, represent districts that have some areas that are hard to count. And those census tracts are not unique, but they're really, really important. For example, in the area that I represent, I have the Isla Vista and the UCSB community, where we have thousands of young individuals who might be undercounted. And as a matter of fact, in 2010, they were undercounted. We have neighborhoods in the district that represent 90% Hispanic Latino, and only 60 to 80% of those households meet internet connectivity thresholds. So you think about how we get information to the communities that most need the information, but also the communities that need and deserve to be counted. We've had past challenges, as I've identified, and as we move forward in 2020, we're seeing that we may have additional challenges and roadblocks that have been put by the federal government. And that means that the role of all of us as a legislature, as members, as leaders in our community, but also the entities involved in today's conversation are going to play an even more important role. And it is clear to me that the nonprofit sector, who has the capacity to touch lives in all of California, rural, urban, suburban, is really an entity that can help address some of these challenges. It's the fourth largest employer or industry in the state of California, and we're looking to nonprofits to be able to work with us to address these challenges. I look forward to learning and hearing from our presenters, from our panelists, from colleagues as we prepare as a state to determine how best to roll out the census outreach work that we plan on doing in collaboration with nonprofit and other organizations. Next, we have, I think, Senator Pan, who is going to open up and say some words. So thank you, Senator.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. First, I want to welcome everyone here. I want to thank GovOps for your investment in making the census a success and for being here today. I also want to thank all of our speakers who have traveled and make time to be here so we can be educated on some of the best practices moving forward and hopefully avoid a lot of pitfalls. As Assemblymember Chair Berman said, we have one shot every 10 years on the census. It's also exciting to see so many people engaged in the census efforts, and I want to thank all the audience members here and to those of you who are watching online. Now, I came from the nonprofit sector. I am currently a member of the United Way board here in Sacramento, served on other nonprofit boards. I also served on our First Five Commission as well. And I know the important role nonprofits play in being trusted messengers to the community. I really appreciate that as Assemblymember Limón, in capacity as chair of the Select Committee on the Nonprofit Sector, reached out to Assemblymember Berman and I saying that we need to early on have this hearing and talk about the role nonprofits can play. And I know Assemblymember Berman and I have been having many conversations about how do we reach out to be sure we can get everyone counted. And one of those really important things is that we do need to be sure that people hear from trusted messengers. There's a lot of people talking about different things related to census, and we are actually concerned that unfortunately, there are going to be people who may be interested in even undermining the census and sending mixed messages about this. Even right now, we're dealing with a court case around the question of the citizenship question, which was not researched and is indicated and seems in documents that have been revealed so far that there may have been political motives. But ultimately, the founders of our country put in the Constitution that we need to do a census every 10 years, and it was very clear that everyone needs to be counted for the census. And so in order to be successful, we need to be sure resources and funding is available to nonprofits and local government. And we also need to be sure that we work in partnership with our smaller nonprofits and community leaders who may not necessarily be the ones that have the kind of fiscal capacity that usually interfaces with government, but have that credibility with varied populations that we need to reach out to. So we need to figure out how we build those bridges between in the census, which is an operation of the federal government, with our state government, with our local government, with larger nonprofits, then with individual community members. And that's one of the things that we need to figure out and work out as we approach the census in 2020. So I'm proud and continue to be enthusiastic of the collaborative work that's being done, and this hearing will better inform exactly how we can further enhance and support the mutual efforts we need to make sure that we count everyone for this census. So with that, I want to cover a few logistics before we start our first panel. Each speaker will have about 5 minutes for opening remarks, then we'll have a question and answer session where the speakers will not be timed. My staffer here is going to hold up time cards. So just to give, give you some feedback on the time. Because of floor session that we're going to have, we'll have limited time for public comment, and we do have a sign-in sheet, as mentioned earlier by the sergeant. So if you are interested in making public comment, please sign in with the sergeants. When you get there, when we get to public comment, we'll try to keep public comment to a minute. However, if you do wish to make longer comments, or you can submit those in writing, and please send those via email to Alyssa or Chris, and the emails are at the bottom of the agenda. So so just sort of hit the highlights in your spoken remarks, but you can feel free to send longer remarks by email. Now let's move on to our first panel. We are going to begin with. So both Los Angeles and San Francisco have established a local complete count committee and have already done a lot of planning and hard work to prepare for the 2020 census. We hope to draw from their experiences in past censuses to gain a better idea of their current efforts, not only to help us understand how we can assist local government, but also serve as role models for other counties trying to put together their census plans. So I'm happy that to introduce our local government panel featuring Dorothea Park from Los Angeles and Adrian Pan from the city and county of San Francisco. Welcome, and thank you for helping us kick off our hearing today. And
quickly, before y'all get started, I just want to recognize my colleague, Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, and see if you want to make any opening remarks.
And I'll be brief. This is really important to me, as I'm from the Assembly district that had the worst undercount in the state. So this is extremely important to me. And I'm going to advocate, as each panel comes up, to really think about doing things out of the box. When you're going after Latino count, African American count, or like in my district, homeless and undocumented, we just can't send Becky and Biff, these white people, to the doors knocking with an iPad, asking them to go into their homes and ask how many people were there. We just can't continue to do same traditional thing and expect a different result. And so outreach and how we do it and do it differently. Whether you have mariachis and Motown music, I don't care. Whether it's burritos or barbecue, I don't care. Whether it's salsa or the electric slide, whatever we need to do to get them out and to get that count as accurate as possible, because as you know, in my community, a lot of communities, they may not show up to one of these hearings or to a very staid kind of fair, census fair, but you put a Ferris wheel out there, you may get a lot of people show up, and I'm willing to push the envelope, even if the federal government may not like it, then maybe the state needs to look at how we can do that, invest in it, so we can get more people to be invested in coming forth and getting that accurate count. So I'm waiting to hear those unique ideas right now. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Assemblymember. I just make one brief remark before we start our panel in relation to that. I would point out that actually the census in a few months, and actually maybe, I think they're starting pretty soon, they're going to be hiring people to be enumerators. They're going to be hiring people to enumerate. Now, they're going to put out a job ad and hire people. I think it's part of our job here to be sure we get a diverse pool of people applying for those jobs so that the person who's knocking on the door is actually from the community. And so I'm just going to put that out there because census may be 2020, but they're going to be hiring soon. And perhaps maybe some of our panelists can speak to that as well about what we can try to do at every stage, all the way up to the census, but being sure that we also have enumerators who reflect our communities so that we can improve the response rate as well. So with that, let's go ahead and begin with Ms. Park.
Good morning. So good morning, Chairman Berman and members of the committee. My name is Dorothea Park. I'm representing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, and I'm the manager of the census for LA County's Chief Executive Office. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to be part of today's conversation. So in terms of cross-sector coordination, locally, regionally, statewide, that's been a cornerstone for us in the County of LA, and it started with the local update of census addresses. We got 88 city partners to collect their addresses. We actually partnered with Community Connect Labs, who helped us organize community-based organizations, county departments, and unions to find the non-standard addresses, people that are living in basements, who are living in trailers, who are living in a non-standard, unconventional way. And we were able to collect over 4,000 of these non-standard addresses just within 465 hard-to-survey block groups. And that was done with the effort and support of our Office of Immigrant Affairs and the California Community Foundation, who's here today to speak to you. Our effort in LA County resulted in over 700,000 addresses being sent to the U.S. Census Bureau, new addresses to be considered to be added. Additionally, at the last Joint Select Committee, I spoke about wanting to have an Antelope Valley convening, and we did pull it off. We partnered again with CCF to do that, and Sac State provided us with the materials, and the Census Director came along with the U.S. Census Bureau, NALEO, and CPAN, our Census Policy Advocacy Network, and also local business partners up in the Antelope Valley. So we are very engaged in creating these partnerships. So we have 3 complete count committees. Our countywide outreach complete count committee is co-chaired with the City of Los Angeles. And what we have there is several subcommittees, one being a stakeholder community table with CPAN through the Advancement Project and supported by CCF. And it is a growing network of CBOs and faith-based organizations that we are working with. We are also working with the Southeast LA Collaborative on the 2020 census strategies. Another group we work with, of course, are 88 cities, and we work with them through our councils of governments. Another subcommittee is higher education, which was mentioned here earlier. We have organized community, state, and the UCLA, as well as private universities to participate. Both administrators and students are on this subcommittee because students know how to reach students, and students are the hardest to count one of the hardest to count populations nationwide. And the goal is to not only encourage them to complete the survey, but also volunteer as Census Goodwill Ambassadors moving forward. Another group that we've engaged is LA Unified School District. Has 500,000 students. They cover 31 of our county cities. They also have preschool, adult education, and numerous other programs. We are tying in with their We Are One program, which was for their immigrant children, in developing a district-wide strategy. And we hope to share this strategy with the other 80 school districts and charter schools in LA County so that they have a menu of options to select from in promoting the census. Another group that we have been meeting with is SEIU. They have 60,000 members in Los Angeles County alone, and they are eager to participate through this process. And we are just starting to organize around businesses and chambers. And one final group that we've started to work with, are universities and media. To begin to create a voice around the importance of public participation in the census and achieving a complete count. Our 2 other complete count committees, are Health and Human Services and Transportation. They focus and bring to the forefront the personal benefits of participating in the census. On a statewide level, we talk biweekly with the City of LA, with Sacramento, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. We also have been participating in the statewide convenings and in the SWORD mapping tool development. With students being one of the hardest to survey populations, we've engaged the administration in a discussion to support public colleges and universities adding an opt-in in completing their registration during their registration process to complete the census survey. And we're hoping we get your support for that. Here in Sacramento, we continue to participate with the legislature and administration in our strategies. So the common strategies I'm going to tell you is start now and develop a complete count committee if you haven't in your counties, and partner with your stakeholders. Become familiar with the mapping tools that tell you where the hard to survey populations are. We're using the statewide Esri-based mapping tool that we also use by block group. And we want to partner, and we are partnering with CCCs, CBOs, and NGOs on the SWORD system, and we're doing an Adopt a Block Group program. And we're focusing on hard-to-survey populations by geography. We also recognize that there are also populations that need to be adopted that may not be in a geography, such as Native Americans, veterans, and LGBTQ communities. We are committed to finding solutions and filling gaps with our Census Goodwill Ambassadors, our volunteer programs and government employee volunteers, mobilizing college and high school students and unions. And we're committed to implementing Census Action Kiosks to provide our populations with a venue with in-language information, translation services, and assistance in completing the survey. We also want to make certain that we've trained our CCCs, our CBOs, our employees, and NGOs in outreach messaging. So things that we want to avoid in duplicating of efforts and avoiding gaps, we want to all be using that SWORD system to locate our Census Action Kiosks and to locate our CB adopted block groups. And that'll help us avoid creating gaps, because if there are gaps, we will fill those in with municipalities, unions, colleges, and universities. One area I would like you folks to consider addressing going forward along with us is the development of a mechanism that shares the Census Bureau, the state, the CBOs and NGOs research and data from various focus groups and other testing methodologies to help establish the surround sound messaging and pooling of effective strategies that resonate with hard-to-survey populations. If you or your staff would like additional information about LA County, I'd be happy to meet with you. Thank you for inviting me to participate on the panel to take the 2020 census planning effort to the next step for the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Park. Ms. Pon.
Okay. Good morning, committee chairs and members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing. My name is Adrienne Pon. I'm Executive Director of the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs for the City and County of San Francisco. We are a policy, grant-making, direct service, and compliance office that provides over $4 million in immigrant assistance programs, language access, and civic engagement projects. We work with low-income public housing and immigrant populations. We operate 3 public-private nonprofit initiatives: the San Francisco Pathways to Citizenship, Dream SF Fellowship, and the Community Ambassadors Safety and Workforce Development Program. Many of these projects evolved from our work during the 2010 census. We are one of about 20 immigrant affairs offices in the country. We coordinate with other cities and states, and we will be overseeing the 2020 census effort for San Francisco. Like many jurisdictions, San Francisco has unique challenges: high density, high number of non-traditional, unrecorded, or low visibility housing. We have one of the highest hard-to-count populations in the state and nationally. 1 in every 3 residents is immigrant. We have a high level of diversity with significant contributions from communities of color. Nearly half of our population speaks a language other than English at home. If you add to that, over 13% of our population lacks access to the internet. There's a huge digital divide, particularly for seniors, low-income communities, monolingual LEP households, and people with disabilities. Our approach to the census focuses on street-smart, relevant grassroots outreach, close collaboration, and cross-section with a cross-section of city, nonprofit, community-based foundation, business, education, and labor partners, people that represent and reflect our communities. In 2010, our strategic plan divided the city into 8 hard-to-count areas with targeted approaches in each, while conducting a citywide general census campaign. We formed a diverse 25-member cross-sector complete count committee that coordinated well with the San Francisco Immigrant Rights Commission, and then many complete count committees were formed across the city. Funding was coordinated with 5 local foundations, and the city provided, nobody had any money in 2010, so we provided $650,000 in templates for the grants, RFP, and criteria. We held quarterly training sessions and monthly events, partnered with other Bay Area cities and counties and foundations on mapping and sharing tracking tools to monitor response rates by census tracts. Also, this may sound like an antithesis to the census, but we try to build a sense of fun and purpose. You have to make this real and relevant for people. So we apply creativity to the outreach. For instance, in the Mission District, community groups partnered on a photo novella that starred some of our own employees, and it reached thousands of people. They also held a soccer match that attracted over 1,000 census participants in a single event. In the Tenderloin, one of the smallest grants, supported an info booth at the TET Festival, which drew 10,000 residents. We use our workforce development resources to deploy our own ground crew of 120 residents to conduct daily outreach and education focusing on public housing, SRO, and Section 8 residents who reflected the actual population that we were trying to reach out to, largely immigrants in African American and Latino communities. The Chinatown and Bayview areas, two of the hardest to count areas of the city, improved by 10% or more in their response rates. And this was, excuse me, all due to the work of our community partners. We transformed the field team into a highly successful ongoing workforce development program. Post-census, a dozen of the workers are still working today and employed city employees. There's 30 of them all over the city working in hotspot transit business quarters of the city. So by investing our limited dollars in efforts that didn't duplicate the mainstream mass media efforts and outreach by the U.S. Census Bureau, we were the only county in California whose participation rates remained steady and improved in all 8 hard-to-count areas. We were able to build on that effort and turn these into sustainable programs and initiatives. Here are our recommendations. The state of California could be instrumental in ensuring resources and training at the front end, as well as significant grant funds across the state. And this is not a one-size-fits-all effort. We need to look at gaps, areas of the state that are undercounted, under-resourced, and let regional, local areas tailor the approaches. Foundations can be helpful in data and research and getting resources to areas with the least capacity and infrastructure to fill gaps. And finally, we hope that the state's plan will allow cities and counties with the capacity to manage their own coordinated, targeted, large-scale grants effort. We need state funds for technology and to train cities and counties who are key points of coordination. You have to have the local presence linking the effort and tailored approaches and sharing information and best practices with other counties. So San Francisco will be launching our Complete Count Committee and Grants Program in the next month. Our focus is on tech and digital applications, training, multilingual, multicultural, and non-traditional outreach. We already have our young rapper identified to be the face of our 2020 census. We look forward to working with everyone on this effort. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And with that, I want to turn it over to colleagues for any questions or comments they have for the panelists. A couple of questions, and you both touched upon this a little bit in your opening remarks, but what are your plans, both from what you've learned in prior attempts and also just how technology has changed, to measure and kind of towards measuring and reporting the reach, impact, and areas of need in your outreach efforts? So how, the state is very eager to support these efforts, and we were able to get a lot of money in the budget. The main thing that I heard from my colleagues while I was advocating for that increased funding was how can we make sure that we're actually tracking the effectiveness of the efforts and changing tack if need be if efforts aren't effective. So any thoughts or advice you have on how to do that?
So what we're currently doing is we're working with the Advancement Project, who is our stakeholder community group, and they're indicating to us what areas they can cover throughout the County of Los Angeles and the unincorporated areas as well as the cities. And we're literally going to be mapping the block groups that they can cover, and where we have gaps, we're going to identify those early enough so that we can get the kind of volunteers, whether it's unions, students, county employees, or city employees, in place to fill those gaps. or whether there are any enumerators that are hired through the Census Bureau, although those enumerators do require citizenship.
Which is new, correct?
Well, it's different from last time.
Sure.
Last time there was a waiver. So
Yeah.
basically, we realize we're going to have to look at these other resources as well. So that's what we're doing. We're literally going through each of the 88 cities, the unincorporated areas, and we're looking at them by block group to make certain we have coverage.
Great.
During the 2010 census, we did apply a number of metrics at the front end of our effort and partner with other cities because not everybody had the same capacity or resources, and we used a common tracking tool. So we're able to monitor response rates by census tracts in each of our areas, and then anytime you did an activity to see if there was an uptick in the response rate. For this go around, I think we're going to have to employ other, not only that effort, but my suggestion to cities and counties in the state is make good friends with your planning departments, because they were my lifesavers. They did a lot of the deep dive into the census tracts. They could tell me exactly where we needed to go so we could deploy our community partners to those parts of the city where we knew the response rate wasn't working. So I think having technology training, because this is the first time we're going to have an all digital census, there are a lot of concerns we have for the hard to count areas of the city where people don't have access to smartphones. They don't even have internet or cable in their households. So you have to think about realistic ways to help them participate. And those are the kinds of things that the state can be really helpful with. We'll have our own local tools, but if the state could figure out a system that they can train us on, invest in that would just be a lifesaver.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as you're talking about what you've been able to identify some of the hard to reach populations, the potential investment in technology, how do we think about, for example, duplications with partners, right? So you all know what you're doing because your organization is leading it. You're having the conversations. You know what census tracts you've been to and you haven't. How do we ensure approach that doesn't offer duplication when we really need that count to be super accurate?
So in Los Angeles County, the Advancement Project is trying to coordinate other CBOs throughout the county, which is a huge undertaking just geographically. And also we have urban, suburban, and rural areas. So it's a pretty big charge for them. But they so far have at least 45 groups, and I'm sure they're going to be in the hundreds because they were in 2010 by the time they were done pulling together the various CBOs, and they have had strong support from CCF as a foundation, and I think there'll be other foundations that will step up to help support that effort in Los Angeles County. So that's more or less how we are going to be attacking it. And I think through the state SWORD system, which is this Esri-based system, we'll be able to get real-time response. And our LA County system is also Esri platform, so we will be able to have all of our data mapped onto the state system, and we will be able to locate our county facilities that can be utilized for census action kiosks, as well as churches and other organizations. So there's a lot of coordination, but we have a long road ahead of us. But these are some of the tools we're starting to work on.
Yeah, and I think for San Francisco, in 2000, we were undercounted by 100,000 residents. So we learned something from that effort in 2010 by really being real about our strategy and our approach. We did citywide training. Every single in the city and county of San Francisco, that's public contact. We trained our own workers. We trained. Everybody got trained in the same way. Coordinate, everybody got relationships. They letting other people know, hey, we're working are working on the congregation, so there's no need to overlap and do that. There's a, when there's no money, as none of us had in 2010, you get real creative and you don't waste your resources. For 2020, resources aren't really the issue. It's really the coordination and really thinking about the messaging that hits home with people. And it's not because, you know, whether you think we have a crappy presidential administration that's racist and trying to divide us, or you support that administration. I think the point is making sure every single Californian gets counted so that we get our fair share of all the resources, the voice, and the representation that we are entitled to. And that's really, you know, lifting it up to, you know, we the people of California need to do this for each other and to look out for each of our communities, not just our own.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. This is a nonpartisan issue. It's a California issue. We're all paying taxes, and we should rightfully get those taxes back, you know, for the to fund the federal programs in a fair count of the number of people who live here. So really appreciate that. You know, we need to merge. We still need to stay creative like we did in 2010 when we had limited resources. And I loved hearing about, you know, the different things that San Francisco has done, and I'm sure LA did. And like Mr. Jones-Sawyer mentioned, you know, we really need to make this something fun, and find a way to show our communities that everybody is participating, to lower the level of anxiety that exists in a lot of our communities, and to make people more comfortable with participating. So I want to recognize Assemblymember Irwin, who joined us. Do you have any questions or comments, general or no? Great. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you participating. Looking forward to many more conversations over the next 20 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next up, we have local and regional community engagement efforts by nonprofits. Oh, Ms. Limón.
Thank you, and I'd like to welcome up our Jan Matsuoka, Chief Executive Officer of the California Association of Nonprofits, as well as Joseph Thomas McKellar, Co-Director of PICO California, faith-based nonprofit. And we will have Jan, you start off.
Thank you very much, Assembly members, and it's just wonderful that you're doing this as a joint hearing, and I couldn't be happier about that. I'm Jan Matsuoka, CEO of the California Association of Nonprofits, Cal Nonprofits for short. We have more than 10,000 nonprofit organizations as members, with members in 57 of California's 58 counties, so we're kind of everywhere. Not very well known is that 1 in every 16 California workers works for a nonprofit, from clinics to preschools, from inner city arts to the non-ho health clinic, from the PTA to the Samoan Community Center. Every year, California nonprofits bring in $40 billion from out of state into California through federal awards, foundation grants, and individual donations. Every day, we nonprofits see the people who are traditionally undercounted. They come to see doctors and dentists in our health clinics, to pray in houses of worship, to receive groceries at our food banks, to answer the door to a Meals on Wheels volunteer. But nonprofits also know that we are uniquely positioned to support a complete count. We are already the trusted partners of millions of Californians. Hundreds of thousands of people come to nonprofit facilities every day. For example, to nonprofit clinics to whom they have already entrusted their health records, their identification numbers, and their cell phone numbers. They pick up their children at our child care centers and after-school programs. We know how to rent Ferris wheels. Nonprofits are already out and about and working in the communities where an undercount looms. We are always going door to door anyway in undercounted neighborhoods. We know all the homeless youth by names. We are in the smallest towns in rural California, and we're already visiting the homeless camps, the board and care homes, the farm worker housing, and the families of children with disabilities. When we do free vaccine clinics in low-income neighborhoods for pets, crowds emerge to take advantage of those circumstances. We can incorporate census work into our ongoing activities rather than to have to create new activities that are added onto our work. For example, when delivering meals to the elderly, handing out socks to warm homeless people, through the backpacks of the children in our after-school programs, and having young people do census videos in our arts and theater classes. Nonprofits have the experience and expertise to bridge cultural and language barriers that could contribute to an undercount. We know the local ethnic media. We know the neighborhood newsletters. We can put up posters, text, and speak to people in their own languages. Our board members extend the reach of nonprofits. Nonprofits can quickly recruit thousands of enumerators from the underemployed people in our communities who are eager to be trained to do the job well. Nonprofit and community leaders want to serve on county and city complete count committees, as I did in San Francisco's 2010 complete count. We know that leaders in undercounted communities can be recruited to serve on them who know how to participate in civic affairs and want to connect complete count committees to local communities. So what do we nonprofits need to be able to do this work that we are plainly qualified to do? First, even when folding census outreach into our ordinary programs, we need funding. We need dollars to go to the nonprofits who have direct reach into these communities. Nonprofits need technical assistance in applying for census funds, and we need a process that is reasonable and straightforward. Grants to nonprofits must include adequate reimbursement for indirect costs, since costs such as insurance, accounting, and HR will increase. Funding needs to go to the community-based nonprofits, which are often not the large institutions, those that have arisen from rural areas, poor communities, immigrant communities, and communities of color. Our impact study, Causes Count, which you've just received, showed that disparities in California are reflected in the nonprofit community. As just one example, there are twice as many nonprofits per capita in the Bay Area as in the San Joaquin Inland Empire area, and Bay Area nonprofits have 21 times per capita more dollars than nonprofits in those communities. We need enumerator job applications and areas identified as most desperately needing enumerators. We need to be connected to the local complete count committees so that we can recruit community leaders to serve on them. We need collateral that candidly doesn't look or sound like a government pamphlet that's been hurriedly translated into Spanish or Chinese. We need training programs where nonprofits eager to participate can learn doable ways to reach people through their existing systems and volunteers. In short, nonprofits are ready, eager, and uniquely able to support the census. We have a knowledgeable and trusted reach into California's undercounted communities that no one else can claim. We look forward to this challenge. I'm under time even.
Thank you. Efficiency.
You get another one.
You're exemplifying efficiency in the nonprofit world. Thank you, Joseph.
Well done. Good morning and buenos dias. Esteemed members of the Select Committee on the 2020 Census, on behalf of Pico, California, and our 450,000 members and our many community-based partners, thank you for the opportunity to share with you our strategy for ensuring a complete count of our communities and to make some recommendations to the legislature and the administration about how to best deploy your valuable resources and expertise. We agree with your assessment that the 2020 census is of critical importance to all Californians, especially communities of color, low-income communities, and communities with high populations of young people. You've already heard that according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, areas most affected by census undercounting lose about $2,900 per person per year in federal funding. But what's at stake isn't only federal funding or congressional seat apportionment. What's at stake is the very legitimacy of government to be a force for equity and opportunity. At a moment in history where the very questions of who is human, who belongs, who deserves a share of the California dream are being contested, at a time of increasing division and anxiety driven by the demonization of one another. Being asked to participate in the census sends a powerful message about who matters. We see the census as an opportunity to build bridges between neighbors who are otherwise out of relationship and to rebuild the connective tissue in our communities that awakens people to each other's humanity. We have developed a 5-pronged strategy to ensure a complete count in 2020. Number 1, infrastructure planning and goal setting. We seek to invest in upgrading our technology to implement a data collection and tracking system that allows us to A, effectively target neighborhood-level census outreach, B, track our progress over time, C, recruit volunteers, and D, communicate regularly with residents in hard-to-count or HTC communities. Number 2, grassroots canvassers. We will recruit and train thousands of grassroots canvassers and volunteers from HTC communities. Our guiding principle is that the messenger is as important as the message. Number 3, build community organizing capacity. We see the census as a key opportunity to build ongoing organizing capacity to ensure resources from the federal government in the years after 2020 are reaching and benefiting families in our communities. Number 4, launch a massive public education and relationship building campaign. We will deploy canvassers and volunteers to engage in as much face-to-face relational outreach as possible. And number 5, the air game. We must effectively develop messaging and education materials that speak to diverse cultural and language groups in HTC areas. We are currently engaged in census message research projects in Orange County, Los Angeles, and the Inland Empire, supported by the California Community Foundation and the California Endowment. Our recommendations to the committee. Number 1, prioritize relational outreach. Professor Hari Hahn at UC Santa Barbara has found that relational organizing is 40 times more effective than cold calls. We've learned through our voter engagement programs, which target voters and potential voters in HTC communities, that the way to get people to vote is, counterintuitively, not to lead with a conversation about voting, but rather a conversation about the needs in our communities and about imagining a better future. The same approach should be taken with the census. Number 2, training. State funding should support experienced trainers who know how to teach canvassers the principles of community-based relational equity building and who have practice with it. The goal is not to drive a big transaction. We're not looking for survey collectors. Number 3, recruitment. Canvassers should be recruited from organizations with a track record of successful relational outreach and community organizing experience. Number 4, as you've heard already, start as soon as possible. We need a robust outreach and education component to start in early 2019, a sort of get ready for the census campaign, which plows the ground for the canvassers once census forms become available in 2020. This priming the pump in 2018 and 2019 is as important as the canvassers' work in 2020. Number 5, contracting. Based on lessons from the 2000 and 2010 censuses, contracting in most cases should go through administrative CBOs, not cities and counties, because CBOs have a better grasp on the nonprofit landscape than local governments, again, in most cases. Also, the reporting requirements for CBOs should be at least onerous as possible. Number 6, design and support an infrastructure for ongoing collaboration and communication. This is an enormous effort that will require close collaborations across the sectors, including with philanthropy. Second to last, number 7, protect confidentiality of information obtained, even if it means litigation. And lastly, resources. More resources will likely be needed. We applaud the state's $90 million initial investment. It's more than the state has ever invested, and it's likely not enough. Our calculations with CPAN, which you've heard about already, show a minimum of $107 million will be needed just for CBO outreach alone. That's an additional $95 million beyond the $12.5 million already allocated to CBO outreach in the governor's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the nonprofit sector? Any comments?
So one question I have, actually, you both touched upon this, but are there, have you identified efforts yet to identify people who might be interested in taking part or taking the test to become federal census employee enumerators, and what's your plan for how to recruit those folks and make sure that they get the training they need just to get through the application process, let alone actually doing the job?
Well, every single day in almost every nonprofit organization and communities, we see underemployed people, not just unemployed people, but often underemployed people make the most ready-to-train enumerators. And nonprofits are just dying to be able to say to people, here, take this test, fill out this form.
Yeah, I would add that we haven't yet started recruiting folks to be employed by the census, but certainly we've been talking to volunteers about volunteering with the census and being a part of the army of canvassers that goes out into our communities. These are folks from congregations, from community-based organizations, from schools in these hard-to-count communities who've been working with us since at least 2012 through our voter engagement work. And we're very excited about the census work because this allows us to talk to everyone in hard-to-count communities, not just registered voters or those who have the ability to register.
Assemblymember Curry.
So I have a bit of a concern when I look at my rural communities. Many of the rural communities have been a lot of fires, and we are losing people left and right, and the nonprofits are unable to probably pick up. Do you have any suggestions on where can we get additional people to actually do the census for us? I'm really concerned is that the population there, I don't think is going to get necessarily counted.
Well, I think that one of the strengths of nonprofits is that we're in every community. As I mentioned earlier, even our members are in 57 of California's 58 counties. And our members who are in rural communities, as you know, are always driving around from one place to another. So they're already reaching a lot of these people, and I think that they're very well positioned to do that. And because they already know a lot of the young people, and again, people who are coming to the food banks and other things, they know a lot of people that would be very happy and glad to do this work of enumeration. And I think that, so I actually have a lot of confidence. When we saw in the 2010 committee in San Francisco, just enormous success in nonprofits recruiting enumerators. Now that's an urban area, but I believe that because it was on the ground community nonprofits that did that recruiting for applications, that I think we were much more successful than in some other areas. And just one other thing, I think a lot of the other philanthropy and large nonprofits tend to be in the metro areas, and so I think that our ability to be in every county, we just have to get somebody from Alpine County, and we'll be in 58. Really gives us a unique ability to, and our focus is going to be on the areas outside the metro areas where there's less reach from other people.
And I would just add that since 2010, there's been a massive investment in building community organizing capacity in rural areas. So in 2020, it's almost night and day in terms of some of the organizations on the ground in places like the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, kind of the North Valley of Sacramento, Del Norte, Humboldt counties, kind of the border with Oregon. So we actually have a lot of confidence as well based upon some of the relationships we have with community-based organizations that we'll be able to find the right people. But you're right. I mean, we have to start now, and it's not going to be easy.
One of the things that I've heard both of you mention is the idea that this work needs to begin now. And there's also a confidence that we can hire or bring on board volunteers to do this. Can you speak a little bit to what exactly you're doing now and why you have that confidence? I guess from my lens, I'm thinking we need to do more now. We need to have a pool of individuals ready to go, set to applying for the enumerator positions. Also kind of just, a bench of people who are going to do this work. What are nonprofits doing right now to ensure that we have the right individuals? And I appreciate what was shared by Mr. McKellar Thomas McKellar, about the professor who said that 40 times more, it's 40 times more effective to build a relationship than just to have an ask, and I appreciate that. So what's happening now?
Go ahead, you want to start?
Yeah, so we are a part of a table called the Million Voters Project, which is made up of some of the largest state networks of CBOs and nonprofits in the state. We have kind of an organizing presence and local organizing capacity in 3/4 of the assembly districts across the state. And since 2012, we have been growing our capacity to reach voters primarily in these hard-to-count communities. This year in 2018 will be our 4th cycle of what's called kind of our civic engagement programs. And so we have a track record of taking folks through a training program since 2012 in the principles and practices of relation-based organizing. People who are used to going door to door into schools, into congregations, into businesses where people in hard-to-count communities live and work. To have deep conversations with them about the kind of California they want to pass on to their children. And we find that that kind of relationship-based, face-to-face interactions are far more effective anecdotally, and the evidence suggests it. That professor's from UC Santa Barbara in your district. She's been researching community organizing. She's amazing. And so we're hopeful that once the enumerator kind of job descriptions and sort of like the recruitment process begins, that we'll be able to get the word out to a lot of folks who already come equipped with a set of skills that we need for the 2020 census.
I agree with that point. We've been contacted by a number of areas asking to help recruit people for complete count committees, and I think that's one thing that we are doing. But I think that, if we had the materials now, we could start tomorrow. If we had the applications for enumerators today, we could send them out tomorrow. We could start sending them out with people, not just the organizing organizations, like PICO, who do a great job, but also with the kind of the human service delivery and the arts organizations that have a reach into a different community as well.
Thank you.
One follow-up question that I'm blanking on because I had it a minute ago. So you all are the closest to the communities and the closest to the vulnerable communities in all of our districts. One thing is I've been talking with folks about the census, including at some of the convenings that the state organized, was just this incredibly high level of anxiety that exists in our communities about participating. And one conversation in particular that I had was with leaders of the Muslim community who expressed their concerns. I tried to reply. They said, we know, but still. I came back with, all the talking points I had. I exhausted the list of talking points that I had. And they said, we know, but we're still not comfortable. And I said, well, what will you need to hear to be comfortable? And they said, we don't know yet, but we'll know when we hear it. Are you, do you have any answers? Or have you, I'm assuming you've been having conversations with vulnerable communities that you work with on what does resonate, what does kind of give people the comfort that they need to participate in this process?
Well, I think Joseph's point about relations, someone you have a relationship with makes a big difference. But I also have to say that right now, most of the media is about anxiety about the census. We are not emitting messages right now about the positiveness of the census. And as a result, I think that by overplaying anxiety, we're actually contributing to increased anxiety about it. We are very late in getting out the messages about the importance of the census, safety of the census, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I would reinforce that point. I think that we have a ways to go still in building the trust that we need with communities of color and vulnerable communities that have been under attack for the last few years. We think that, yes, as I said earlier, the messenger is as important as the message, but the message is going to matter as well. And some of that is being experimented with, as I mentioned, through a research project that California Community Foundation is funding. The other thing is I've spoken to a few folks that said, is there a way in which the information collected, or if state dollars are used to help collect information from folks participating in the census, is proprietary in some way to the state, that the state can use that as leverage with the federal government to ensure privacy, and to know that the state is willing to engage in lawsuits and any kind of power that the state has to make sure their information is protected. I think that will go some way. But we're still also learning a lot about what it's going to take. And again, it just reinforces the point about starting as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to more conversations over the next 20 months. So next we're going to move on to our final panel, the role of foundations in supporting a complete count in California. And we have with us Maricela Rodriguez, Senior Communications Program Manager for the California Endowment, Nancy Jameson, President and CEO of the San Diego Grantmakers, and Efrain Escobedo, Vice President, Education and Immigration at the California Community Foundation and a member of the state's Complete Count Committee. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us today. And why don't we go my left to right, Maricela, if you'd like to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much. I'd like to start by thanking Chairperson Limón, Chairperson Pan, and Chairperson Bergman for bringing us together and continuing your leadership and helping us think through how best to leverage the $90 million investment towards a complete count. I'd also like to note that, like many others, philanthropy has also begun a coordination effort facilitated through grantmakers concerned with immigrants and refugees, of which the endowment serves as a co-chair. As a collaborative, we're focused on the hard-to-count population, and understanding how the state plans to leverage the $90 million will help all partnering foundations finalize our strategic plans. So there's a lot of eagerness and urgency in understanding how the state plans to move forward, and we're prepared to complement and support and fill in the gaps. Some questions that have been raised in discussions include things like, will there be planning dollars for on-the-ground groups? What technical assistance will be available? What communication funding is likely? The California Census 2020 Funders Initiative continues to create its coordinated plan to align philanthropic funding while the state determines the purpose and mechanisms for distribution of public dollars. We will continue to monitor the state's actions while we initiate short and long-term investments based on the impact we prioritize together. I also wanted to share some lessons learned from our 2010 evaluation post-census. Some strengths that were identified included effective and far-reaching canvassing activities, use of media to reach certain isolated populations, trusted messengers to promote census participation, a commitment to collaboration and coordination among many grantees. I would further highlight the critical importance of partnerships with community organizing networks as a resource to reach the hard to count. They are an authentic voice for the community and can be an important resource to achieving a successful count. At the endowment, we plan to leverage the infrastructure that exists locally on the ground. And as you've heard earlier today, we're supporting our integrated voter engagement partners, our 14 healthy community sites, among other partners. And you may also hear from my colleagues just the importance and consideration to give the flexibility and support of the nonprofit sector, and how we potentially have you consider grants versus contracting. On the communication side, because this is a key element to past efforts around the Affordable Care Act, which the endowment sees as an important similar effort where we can take lessons learned for the census. From the endowment's Medi-Cal enrollment efforts under the Affordable Care Act, for every dollar we invested in direct outreach, we matched it with paid media. Building surround sound to amplify the voices of the eligible but uninsured, including media, social media, and earned media. And I appreciate the earlier comments about thinking out of the box, and I'd be happy to share within today or in the future about some of the things that we did to get creative and do things out of the box, which included things like partnering with barbershops and taco trucks and street teams and churches and other things as part of our overall communications efforts. We created a Spanish media partnership and supported ethnic media to ensure we were reaching a diverse audience. The endowment will only have a small fraction of that investment for the census. Philanthropy will support the census in various ways, but a gap in paid media is likely to remain. As we did with our ACA efforts, we'll be investing in message testing to help us understand barriers, trusted messengers, and messaging to reach hard-to-count populations. Message testing is also an area where foundations and other partners are coordinating and sharing information. Starting early, just emphasizing the points that you heard earlier today, starting early is critical. We need to start normalizing the census, and given that 2020 is an election year, it will be much more important to start early and to help us break through the noise. Some notes on grant making. We understand that public dollars come with high accountability, and that flexibility may be more challenging with contracting. So again, considering grants over contracting. What we also learned from 2010 is that you need to keep dollars available for the non-response follow-up period so that hotspots areas that have lower response scores can be reached by trusted people when enumerators are going out to knock on doors. Circumstances change, and nonprofits need latitude to make adjustments in order to reach the goal. Therefore, the state should and can plan for flexibility and build it into its contracts and grants at the outset. If there's a plan to collect performance information that can be aggregated across the region or the state, this needs to be recognized as a necessary budget, personnel costs, and a reporting platform must be straightforward for users to use. Also consider multi-year funding. This gives partners some level of certainty to plan and potentially staff up or down. And lastly, I would also note that it may be helpful to touch base with folks like Covered California who have some experience with the Affordable Care Act and that undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Jameson.
Madam and Mr. Chairs, members of the Senate and Assembly committees, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today on this crucial issue that will shape our shared futures. My name is Nancy Jameson. I'm here on behalf of Philanthropy California, an alliance of Northern California, Southern California, and San Diego grantmakers where I'm the president and CEO. The 2020 census is a once-in-a-decade opportunity to make an impact on the well-being of the people we serve. In recognition of the impact that an inaccurate census would have on California, our three organizations through our alliance have embarked upon fully supporting a fair and accurate census count. As regional membership associations, we convene philanthropy with over 600 members across the state, family, community, and private foundations, corporate giving programs, grant-making public charities, and individual donors. Philanthropy is investing in the census because of its crucial role in shaping and informing public policy. The census produces demographic data that guides the allocation of federal resources and fair political representation. Funders rely on the census data to inform long-term plans and grants by leading data-driven decisions about where to allocate the resources. For example, some funders employ census data to identify community needs, demographic trends, and gaps in services. As you know, historically hard-to-count populations include children between 0 and 5, urban and rural low-income households, limited English proficient, immigrant and mixed-status families, and single-parent households. These are populations that philanthropy cares about. We know that many hard-to-count communities will be less likely to fill out the census due to the inclusion of the new question on the 2020 census that asks about U.S. citizenship. This scare tactic will result in unreliable data for the next decade and affect the state's fair share of federal resources. Philanthropy is also interested in the census because of the resources that the census brings. As has been mentioned, in California, census information guides 76 billion federal funds to the state, which amounts to $2,000 per person. These funds provide financial assistance to human services programs like Medicaid, SNAP, S-CHIP, WIC, and housing vouchers, to large-scale capital investments like highway planning and construction. Funders are happy and grateful that the state is investing significant resources into the census. Public dollars will be very valuable to all sectors that receive support to ensure a complete and accurate count. What we have heard from funders is that the state's investment is something they are taking into consideration as they make plans to invest in the census themselves. Funders are eagerly awaiting knowledge about what the state plans to do and when. While philanthropic dollars cannot replace government funding for the census, philanthropy can help to supplement the state's investments. We know that there is a critical need for more infrastructure at the municipal and local level across the state. Funders are looking to the state to particularly support efforts in areas outside of the major cities, such as Central Valley, Inland Empire, and Imperial County. Community Foundation and other regional organizations are well situated to serve as intermediary hubs to best leverage state resources. Because of what is at stake, philanthropy has tackled several efforts to ensure an accurate count. We have jointly opposed the U.S. Department of Justice's request to add citizenship question to the 2020 census, and philanthropy has a key role to play in leveraging its influence, community connections, and dollars to yield a fair count. Consequently, philanthropic organizations have launched the California Census 2020 Funders Initiative Plan. This initiative coordinates funding and activities among foundations as well as focuses on hard-to-count populations. We collaborate with and rely on trusted community-based organizations to provide local outreach in the counties. This initiative also supports the planning of individual regional hubs and how they coordinate with one another and with statewide efforts. Locally, the Bay Area and Southern California and San Diego have already or will launch regional convenings and education on this issue for local funders. We look forward to our continued partnership with the state to leverage both public and philanthropic dollars to ensure that each and every Californian is counted. Thank you for your time and your interest in this topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Escobedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable chairs and members of the various committees convened here for this joint hearing. My name is Efrain Escobedo. I'm Vice President with the California Community Foundation. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the role of philanthropy in supporting nonprofits in the 2020 census. This joint hearing couldn't be timelier as California's Complete Count Office is currently developing a statewide plan for deploying the state's investment of $90 million to support a complete count for California. Similarly, nonprofit organizations, as we're learning today, have begun to lay out more comprehensive plans for efforts to educate, activate, and assist hard-to-count communities across the state. It's important to recognize that given the unprecedented risks facing the state of California in the 2020 census, the unprecedented investment of $90 million by this legislative body can help fight against one of the largest undercounts of Californians in decades. How and when we allocate these funds will determine their impact on the 2020 census. California Community Foundation is a place-based foundation serving the Los Angeles County region. The foundation has served the communities of LA for more than 100 years. Our mission is to help lead positive systemic change to strengthen Los Angeles for all, but especially our most vulnerable communities. The foundation has set achieving a complete count in the 2020 census as a top priority over the next 2 years, specifically ensuring that efforts to support hard-to-count communities and populations are fully resourced. We know we can't do this alone, and with Los Angeles being the hardest to count community in the nation, this Herculean goal will require full coordination and the obvious support of the state. I'm honored to address you today in the company of other committed partners in philanthropy. You've heard today a narrative of commitment, coordination, and desire for collaboration from our sector. With my remarks, I'd like to add to the conversation by sharing some concrete examples of how our coordination has helped more localized efforts in LA County, providing the state important principles to consider as the state's Complete Count Office develops a comprehensive investment plan. Since the start of 2018, California Community Foundation has been an active member of the state California Funder Group that's been referenced here today and is chaired by the James Irvine Foundation and the California Endowment. Our group, now growing to over 30 foundations of local and state, and with varying missions and priorities, have aligned with a common goal of a complete count. As you've heard today, the group's current efforts to develop a strategic plan from my colleague Maricela at the Endowment, and about our goal to ensure strong alignment with the state. It's important to note that at the state and local level, philanthropy has played a supporting role in early census efforts, in large part thanks to our work together as a funders group. In LA, the California Community Foundation, in partnership with other partners like the Weingart Foundation, have been working at a local level with community organizations and Los Angeles County and City to support these planning efforts. To date, California Community Foundation has invested nearly $1 million to support just planning and local research efforts. This support has included the following: helping to convene with the Census Policy Advocacy Network, a local regional group of community organizations now formed and referred to as the LA Census Regional Table. Providing the LA Census Regional Table a planning grant to develop a community-driven outreach plan in coordination with Los Angeles County's Complete Count Committee. investing $500,000 in field and opinion research grants dedicated to developing baseline data on hard-to-count demographics. This work is also helping to inform the work of the state's message testing working group. Being an active member of the County City Complete Count Committee, to which meetings we regularly attend, I want to note that the decision to support planning and research was a product of our coordination with state funders, as this was set as a top early priority for our philanthropic investments. Over the next few months, that the state will develop its plan for investing census funding. I strongly recommend that this plan be centered on hard-to-count communities and populations, with the understanding that if we design our efforts around the extreme user first, we will achieve a truly inclusive effort. In the last part of my remarks, I'd like to reiterate and add to the principles we have shared with you today. Our desire in sharing these principles is to shape the principles the state will adopt in its statewide plan. So first, strengthen, don't just stretch the nonprofit sector. Philanthropy has learned that nonprofits are a precious resource that needs to be sustained and not just depleted. Funding should take care to ensure that after your project, we are leaving a stronger resource behind for our most vulnerable communities. 2, funding should take into account that this is a multifaceted endeavor. This means having a range of allowable activities and support robust outreach, including localized community-relevant research, capacity/infrastructure building, training and technical assistance, coalition building activities, direct contact and relational organizing activities, and also narrative building, the deeper communications work beyond just advertisements. 3, provide agile funding. We recommend grants, not contracts. Accountability can be achieved through clear, detailed grant agreements. And also in this agile funding, to allow for a more robust set of partners that can be funded, grants should have flexibility that recognizes the environment is shifting and organizations must create and integrate census work into their existing community work. It's through this work that the trust we need really exists. And finally, be collaborative, open, and transparent with reporting and evaluation. Data will abound from many sources, as we've heard. Being open to what you have, need, and can share will ensure we have a full picture of our progress and needs. I hope that our presence here this morning demonstrates philanthropy's engagement and desire to coordinate. And in partnering, I urge you to be speedy in shaping the state plan. A well-informed philanthropic sector will help to amplify and expand our collective impact as a state. However, it will be hard to plan if details of this investment are unclear or delayed. We're here to work for all of California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Limón?
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great to hear all 3 panels. There's definitely elements that are themes that you've all kind of shared, and there's elements that are slightly different. And I guess one of my questions, now having heard all 3, and you 3 happen to be the ones that are here to answer this question, so is that there was a little bit of a tone of kind of the state of California has made a $90 million investment. And I heard kind of local municipalities and governments make a case as to why they are an effective entity to kind of take on some of the funding. I heard the nonprofits do the same, and I'm hearing foundations do the same. So now my question is how do you know where is the right place to make the financial investment and who is not? So not just here's why the foundation world would be a great great place to make the investment, but how do we know where it's not a good place to make the investment as well?
Well, I'll certainly share that there's not one single place to make the investment. So there's a role for local government to play. When it comes to the work in hard-to-count communities, I think what you'll hear some of us say and hopefully build upon is our relationships and our funding is based on decades of relationship building with nonprofits, understanding those needs and building and supporting their success and work in those communities. So as far as to who to fund and where to put it, I think it's about where is their genuine community-driven engagement, and then working with philanthropy to understand who are nonprofit partners that we maybe don't see in our from our vantage point. But I would say the reason a lot of it focuses back to the state is because it all begins with the tempo that the state sets. If the $90 million are put into very restrictive contracts, when we go to try to work and engage nonprofits, we will be having to invest resources to help mitigate and have them meet those obligations versus how do you expand and deepen your work. And so it's taking the state's lead in the sense that the way that these grants and this money goes out to the community will either help us to amplify and expand the work or can sort of create a hindrance for us where we put our money. So a lot of it is less on directing where you should put the money because we know it's going to have to be in a number of areas, nonprofit, local government, but more on how you structure this money is going to dictate how nonprofits perform and how we can then leverage that to build upon that more. I hope that kind of addresses some of our comments.
Sure, I'll go that. Okay.
This is a cross-sector problem. I mean, all of us need to step it up and do our part. But the people in the community, the nonprofits in the community-based organizations that have been referenced here many times are the ones that have those relationships, and that's where the energy, the resources, the work is really going to be done in community. On a philanthropic perspective, we need to convene, invest in that, leverage, come in here where the state goes there and play some activation role for those that are not yet activated. So here we have a tremendous leadership in the philanthropic sector is here today, and large foundations and foundations of significance are sitting at the table trying to make this work happen. There's more philanthropy out there that is not quite up to speed on this yet, and that's a little bit of our job, and it's particularly possibly true in some of the hardest to count counties that don't have as much attention locally to this, and that's why we've talked a lot about that. What are we all going to do to help those communities activate whatever it takes, depending on the realities and the nature of that particular place, to get the money out and the energy out and the work done and the voice and the word out to get this count done.
And I would just echo my colleagues' comments, and I would just say know that this is both in terms of like how we invest, but it's also a multi-pronged approach. You not only have to think about who gets the money, but how it gets distributed, whether it's direct on-the-ground outreach versus communication. And we have to recognize from past experience, whether it's the Affordable Care Act or anything else you want to look at, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. I think it's safe to say that the state will have more resources than we will have together. So I think that's why it's very important for us to know how the state's leveraging those resources so that we can come in and be supportive and complementary. And I think I would also echo that you would have to look at population and region, and some comments earlier that were made. There may be some infrastructures that aren't as strong as in other regions, and you may also want to look at that. And also look at the Central Valley as a place that may go underinvested.
Yeah, and the important thing is, and you're hearing it here today, is we're not starting at zero, right? So you've heard about Million Voters Project. You've heard about the work of Count On. There's pipelines on how you get significant amounts of resources into very local communities for impact. There's pipelines. There's major statewide organizations like PICO, California Calls, Advancement Project that are set up to funnel that way, Count on Profits. And so a key part is we're not starting at zero. There's actually pipelines on how you move support into these areas, and it'll be key for the state to stitch into that and work its plan in that way rather than trying to create other ways in.
Great, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that I think you had the comment that it's important to invest in existing infrastructure models or models as opposed to creating new ones. And I think that that's a powerful thing. I think it speaks to the work that's been done, but also into the ability to take these potential funds and use them in a way that's expansive, that supplements the work that's already being doing as opposed to new. And I know you were all very careful to tell me exactly where the money should go, but you did not tell me where the money should not go. So I still leave that question out there because I think that that's part of it. Knowing, yes, where potential money should go, but where should it not go? I think that that's the closest we got, perhaps, being a little thoughtful on whether it's going to places that don't have a history of being able to generate the outcomes we're looking for, especially if the state considers something like a grant versus a contract model. I think from my perspective in seeing the public funds is we just want to ensure that when all is said and done, the major and the historic investment that the state is making is one that yields the outcomes that we're looking for. And that's the fear. It's not the fear that these nonprofits or organizations or municipalities wouldn't do good work with it. But at the end of the day, there's so much at stake. And how do we make sure that the investment that the state of California is making into this initiative yields some of the outcomes that we are looking for in a really hard time, in a time where, I just, people are very sensitive to anyone knocking on their door asking any information. I mean, even if it's a student selling, their fundraising thing for the school, people are really hesitant right now to answer information or give out information. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for your presentation.
And just to echo those thanks, I've been so impressed by the engagement from the philanthropic sector. It was almost a year ago that I'd been set up with somebody to talk about higher education issues. And afterwards, this gentleman asked me, well, what else are you working on? I said, I just became chair of a select committee on the census. And he said, really, that's fascinating. Tell me more. And then he said, can I connect you with the executive director of my foundation? I'd love for you to tell her about it. And so he made the connection, and she immediately replied, we're already working on it. He just hadn't been kind of made aware of that yet, and that shows that the philanthropic sector has really engaged early. At the same time, the philanthropic sector is such a big sector, and as I talk to different foundations, maybe the leaders of the foundations know what everyone is doing, but the funders don't necessarily. So, Ms. Jamison, you've mentioned how there's a network of philanthropies that are coordinating. Are you all keeping track of who's doing what? Making sure that coming up with the big needs list that you see from the philanthropic sector, and then making sure that the different foundations are filling in those gaps. Maybe talk a little bit more about that.
That coordination is sort of the essence of what we do for big issues. It is more robust and mature in different areas of the state than in others. I think you've heard about Los Angeles today, and you've heard about San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Those are centers of philanthropy in big ways. It's a lot of major philanthropists that have already created tables that are talking to each other. The statewide table is there's hanging out together there and trying to coordinate. And that leadership that is being has been formed is going to trickle down and connect to the rest of the state through Philanthropy California, the alliance of the 3 regional associations and other organizations that are in the state. The League of California Community Foundations is here. We know that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, that funders need to talk to each other, and that what they do needs to be deeply informed by what's going on the ground by the folks at the community-based organization that are doing the work. So the structure is there. The progress is being made a little sooner in some places than others, which is something we need to keep in mind as we continue to build out this structure.
Great. And if I heard correctly from multiple speakers today, there's certain parts of the state where that infrastructure might not necessarily exist, where the right. donor database doesn't exist. Maybe the CBO community isn't as strong. Am I right that the Central Valley is a big area of kind of concern or need for additional investment and focus? Are there other parts of the state that you all have identified, or
Inland Valley,
Inland Empire, Imperial County?
Yeah. Okay, that's very helpful to know.
And can I add,
Please.
I think that Assemblymember Aguirre-Curry also had the point about fire-stricken or natural disaster-stricken areas where we've lost a lot of residents and homes, and counting those folks who may be moving around is maybe something else to put on our radar.
Mm-hmm. There's work going on now with our colleague Northern California Grantmakers that is involved in talking to funders and about the fires, and they're linking it to how that's going to impact the census. They've started that work.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's probably good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it. So we're going to move on to public comment.
And I think.
Oh.
And I think, Jan Matsuoka, if you want to start off public comment, because I think you may have had something to add about where the money should not go. And I'd love to hear that.
I think it's only partly about who gets the money, and it's what activities get the money. And traditionally, I have to say that, government and philanthropy, if you use the analogy of a gun like ready, aim, fire, traditionally philanthropy and government have been kind of ready, aim, 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 aim. And maybe we on the nonprofit sector might fire before we take careful aim, but I think we don't have time to build up an infrastructure, to do research, to develop plans, and then revise plans, and then revise plans again. We should, I'm not anti-plan, we want to do that, but we can't wait to already start the outreach, already start doing this work. We can't wait as long as it's going to take. So we need to invest partly in planning, but more in getting off the ground right now.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Ellie Matamora from the County of Santa Clara for a little bit longer at the County of Santa Clara.
Thank you. Thank you to the chairs and select committees for the opportunity, and to all the panelists for their insights. I'm Ellie Matsumura with the County of Santa Clara. And, the number one thing that we feel responsible for bringing to the table as local government is that unparalleled existing capacity to reach our constituents. We have 20,000 county employees. There are very few residents in a given year who don't interact with the county. Our hospital alone provides care to 1 in 4 residents. To say nothing of the clinics, the registrar of voters, assessor, CalWorks, SNAP, public safety, libraries, parks, child care services, probation. You get the idea. And that potential grows when you look at the close partnership we have with the city of San Jose, who's really been out on front on the census. We've already convened 36 top-level cross-sector leaders as our planning committee for the CCC for our September 28th launch. And so when you look at our staff and partners, the hundreds of nonprofit partners that we contract with every year, these relationships really do go deep into hard-to-count communities and families. So we know the people, we know the partners, we know the neighborhoods, and we're ready to mobilize that infrastructure. So in a couple of weeks, we will be bringing to our board a detailed strategic plan to propose to them for how we leverage and complement this infrastructure. So that includes proposals for some original research, some gaps we'd like to fill, and really understanding how we best target and reach key hard-to-count communities. And we've been in conversation with the philanthropic community about this as well. We include roles for staff positions and for how we collaborate with and support our Complete Count Committee. It also addresses how we can step up to meet the census workforce needs. We have workforce development infrastructure that we need to mobilize and build upon, including considering how we make some of those short-term jobs more attractive by thinking about creating a pipeline for those trained enumerators and outreach workers on the back end to be able to plug into jobs where those skills can benefit some of the organizations who've been speaking today, as well as other businesses and partners strengthening our community and local economy. And our plan also includes our cost projections over the 3 fiscal years that this is going to span, so that we can carry all of that out and really leverage what we've got. So we look forward to sharing this plan, and thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Linda Cutler with the League of California Community Foundations.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. I'm really actually wearing two hats. One is I'm the CEO of the Sacramento Region Community Foundation, and I'm personally a proud constituent of Dr. Pan's. But in Sacramento, we are already, as the Sacramento Region Community Foundation, working with the County of Sacramento, but we also represent YOLO, so Ms. Curry's constituents as well, and we have an interesting mix of urban and rural. And I just want to say on behalf of our 4-county area, Sacramento, Yolo, Placer, and El Dorado, we are fully in and want to work very hard in this region to address all of our hard-to-count population. But more relevant to today, I'm here as the chair of the League of California Community Foundations, and I want to thank the California Community Foundation for its leadership in really bringing this issue to the League, and the League has in turn made this an initiative and a key priority. We represent 32 community foundations throughout the state, which represent about 95% of the counties in the state of California. And as community foundations and regional foundations, we have the privilege of really working very closely with our community-based organizations and nonprofits. So I'm really just here to say that the League is here to work with Philanthropy California, with the endowment, with California Community Foundation, to do whatever we can do to make sure that this counts. And so please make sure that we're here as a partner. We clearly know how to do funding. I just want to reiterate my colleagues' comments about the importance of agility in the funding, and again, would come down on the side of grants versus contracts. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Judy Robinson from County of Sacramento.
What she said. No, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Judy Robinson. I'm the Census Manager for Sacramento County. I've been working closely with, the committee staff, select committee staff, Elisa and Chris Wagaman, as well as my counterparts, Ellie in Santa Clara County, and Emma Gonzalez, who's going to present after me from San Mateo County, and of course Dorothea Park from Los Angeles. Government is coordinating across the state, and so the first thing that I would like to reassure you is that Sacramento County does not want the funds to distribute all the contracts to community-based organizations. That was why we reached out to our Sacramento Community Region Foundation and said, you are the right folks to be doing this. Not only that, but it's an opportunity for them to increase their capacity in engaging other community-based organizations that they haven't thus far for regardless of different reasons. But we don't have the capacity to do this. And more importantly, this is a community-led initiative. In order for it to be successful, this really has to be by and of the community, certainly with, government is supporting in all sectors, and certainly we're leveraging our contracts and other work that government does. But this needs to be sustainable because there's so much more important work. The census is huge, but there's so much more important outcomes that can come from this going forward. And I know that that's part of what Ditas and Sword wants to build, but please understand that local government and our region foundations will not be doing the same thing. We are walking lockstep, arm in arm, and working together, supporting each other, and making sure that we do have the right folks at the table. But I would like to reiterate that I think these are Assemblymember Berman's opening comments, is that not all parts of the state are the same. And where other parts of California have some larger foundations and have already been able to receive financial resources from those foundations to be doing some of the early community engagement, as that was part of LUCA, Northern California, particularly Sacramento, we don't have a large foundation. And Linda didn't mention it, but I've been banging on doors and trying to convene meetings and say, we need some funding up here. And so I do have an ask, and the ask is whether it's through other larger foundations in California, or other funding that might be out there. It really needs to be spread through other parts of the state that lack those resources. You already know that we're all in this together, but we really do need financial support in order to pass that through to our community-based organizations to do this necessary work because they don't have the funds or the capacity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dorothy Johnson from CSAC, following Emma Gonzalez from San Mateo County. I'll start to get the line up here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. Dorothy Johnson with the California State Association of Counties, representing all 58 counties, including Alpine. And we just wanted to express our appreciation for this hearing today, and also our how much we welcome the opportunity to serve as a partner and a resource to distribute information to all the counties. We know this is critically important, and again, look forward to this being the first of many steps in partnership together. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Emma Gonzalez, followed by Andrew Medina.
Hi, my name is Emma Gonzalez, and I'm with the County of San Mateo, Census Manager. I'm here today to, one, thank you very much and applaud you for your effort and continued support in this as we undergo the census. 597 days left. That's what I look at every day when I get to work. And that because San Mateo County, and we're in a unique location, we're centered right between San Francisco and Santa Clara, but I'm fortunate to have strong partnerships with my surrounding partners. I think as many of my colleagues have mentioned, we sit on a biweekly call with Sacramento, San Jose, Santa Clara, and Los Angeles, and the city of Los Angeles as well, and the county. We do that because we see the importance of regional collaboration. We all have accountability, shared responsibility, but more importantly, what we've talked about is lessons learned and best practices. As LA County is moving forward, we're learning from that, and we're wanting to figure out ways when we can collaborate. San Mateo County is comprised of 20 cities. 38% of our population are immigrants with over 140 languages spoken. That takes strong collaboration, and that's what we're doing. We've just completed a census count where we got a net of LUCA, not census count, LUCA, and working with Connect Labs as well as Silicon Valley Foundation. Thank you to their efforts. With that, we received a net gain of 16,000 homes. We did entire canvassing of East Palo Alto, which required and worked with our nonprofits. But that, again, took collaboration. And that's the infrastructure that the counties can bring. But here, one of the things that I like to walk away with is really stressing the critical role that the counties play to local government and to working with communities. That's our role as county, and bringing all those partners together and ensuring that we have an accurate count for, again, in 597 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew Medina, followed by Josefina Natsine, I hope I pronounced that right.
Hello, Andrew Medina of Asian Americans Advancing Justice California. We're a member of the Census Policy Advocacy Network, which is made up of organizations that serve hard-to-count communities. We've been advocating in terms of more support for census planning and outreach, particularly with the budget. So today I just wanted to uplift Jan and Joseph's comments today in terms of really stressing the importance of the relationship that our CBOs and nonprofits have with our communities that we serve on the ground, and how valid that is. I did want to note that it would be really important to make sure that there's some care of the funding around these community organizations that do serve these smaller populations. I do want to highlight a comment from Empowering Pacific Islander Communities. They couldn't be here today. For a community organization that serves the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander did doors, did phone banking in language, took language materials and translated into about 18 languages involving 43 translations, worked with ethnic media to provide in-language outreach. This is sort of the breadth of work that is kind of out there in terms of what's going to be needed to be done on the ground that I wanted to highlight. So in terms of additional investment, particularly for the $90.3 million for CBO outreach, would be really vital, as well as also thinking about what next year is going to look like for the California state budget. I know no one wants to hear about next year, but I did want to highlight that as well. So thank you very much for your time. I also did want to do me too for the flexibility of the $90.3 million, as we know, and I had to mention about how can we reach these really specific specific smaller communities in California.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Josefina Ramirez-Natsuna with Children Now, also a member of CPAN. Thank you all for working with us and being a partner. Wanted to just make the point to uplift the importance of recognizing that all communities are complex and ensure that all efforts recognize that young children are nearly a part of every hard-to-reach population, so that any communications and outreach strategies should reflect and emphasize the need to count young children. California has 9 million children. 3 million of those are age 0 to 5. And I think the thoughtful discussion today by the different local government and foundations, we just need to make sure that all those focus is on communities that are hard to count, and also that we're not reinventing the wheel, that there's been great grant programs like the Covered California Grant Program, the One California Grant Program, and that there's a lot of that can be learned and that we can replicate in doling out those funds. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have Santosh Sareem Santa and Anal Kaji, followed by Joe Michael. And we do have assembly hearing session, floor session that starts at 1 o'clock. So I just want to make sure folks are aware.
Okay. Good afternoon, members. I'm Santosh Siram Santana with Chinese for Affirmative Action. We are a civil rights organization located in San Francisco's Chinatown, and as Ms. Pan referenced, one of the hardest to count in San Francisco. So we have been involved in census every decennial census for the last 5 decades. And that experience has taught us many things. Some of our recommendations to the committee and the legislature and the administration is to, one, really pay attention to the local community-based organizations, not just community-based, not just nonprofits. The local community-based organizations have that reach and depth and language skills to reach those harder to reach. So really uplift them as you are thinking about funding. Also, whether that funding is channeled through philanthropic foundations or government entities, that those dollars need to flow directly to local nonprofit groups, local community-based organizations, and not an intermediary. And finally, I would say that it is really important to start early, get those dollars out, because local community-based organizations, they have to hire, train, scale up, get those dollars out, and multi-year funding for local community-based organizations. That way there's continuity of key staff, they can leverage those dollars, and it's not a 12-month grant period where they have to start all over again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Golia Yang. I know the spelling probably threw you off a lot. And I'm with the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, also known as CRAC. We work with over 25 Southeast Asian serving organizations throughout the state, which includes organizations in the Central Valley, in Long Beach, in Orange County, the Bay Area, and also even Butte County. And just want to reemphasize my colleague before me to really ensure that we are funneling the funding to community-based organizations to ensure that our hard-to-reach communities are a part of the complete count. With Southeast Asian Americans, we have really high rates of low-income communities. We have low education attainment. A lot of our families also live in rural counties. And so it really makes our communities even harder to reach. And so we're really relying on the decision to ensure that funding goes into community-based organizations who already serve the population and need the resources to ensure that they're able to beef up their capacity to do census outreach and engagement. Thank you.
And following Joe Michael is Gina De Silva and Jeanette Zanipatin.
Good afternoon. Joe Michael for Equality California. We're also a member of the Census Policy Advocacy Network. I'll keep this brief because I know you all need to get going. But just wanted to align with the comments from other members of CPAN and advocate for strategic use of this funding. Very much appreciate y'all bringing everyone together to have this discussion today. I think this is tremendously important. And just want to highlight that similar to what Josefina was saying, LGBTQ people are part of all marginalized communities in California, pretty nearly. So even though the representation in the census of the LGBTQ community will not be what we hope it will be one day, we still want to make sure that folks are turning out and are participating and want to be helpful to the degree that we can in mobilizing the community. So thank you all so much.
Hi, Jeanette Saripatin with MALDF and also the California Immigrant Policy Center. Also want to thank you for all the hearings that we've had and the funding that we've been able to secure. I think it's really important to understand that we really do need direct funding going straight to CBOs and not have an intermediary. We're going to really need to start early with the census, given that we do have some confusion around the citizenship question and how that's going to play out, and in terms of public charge and what that might mean for immigrant communities. We also need to ensure that community-based organizations that serve those non-traditional languages that we have in California, especially the indigenous languages in the Central Valley, are going to need specific resources to be able to outreach to some of these unwritten languages that we have in the Central Valley. And we're very thankful that there is some built-in flexibility in the funding, and that we continue to have that built-in flexibility, given that we don't know what other policies or policy changes might be coming from the federal government and what impact it's going to have on immigrant communities far and wide here in California. Thank you.
And do we have Gina De Silva? No. Oh, gotcha. Okay, instead. Got it. All right, so seeing no other public comment, I think we're going to bring it back to the chairs.
Go for it. If there are any closing comments you want to make.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone who testified and spoke. I know I had to pop in and out for other committee hearings as well. I know my staff here has been taking copious notes. And again, we just emphasize the very important role, actually not just very important, critical role nonprofits will play in a successful census. And I want to thank Assemblymember Limón for helping us helping us convene this hearing today, and of course, Assemblymember Berman, my counterpart in Assembly, as we look to having a successful 2020 census. And thank you so much for your participation.
Just want to echo the comments of Senator Pan. I've been heartened by the recognition by everybody, bipartisan, nonpartisan, across all industries and sectors, about the importance of the census and of making sure that we have a complete count for California in 2020. And really appreciate everybody who's participated in the hearings that we've had in Sacramento, in the convenings that we've had across the state, in conversations that Dr. Pan and I have had with different groups across the state also, actually, over the past couple of months. And I'm sure that's going to ramp up a lot over the next, I think it was 597 days or 579, 597 days. And it's really going to take a team effort of the philanthropic sector, the CBO community, the nonprofit sector, government at the state level, the county level, the city level, working together to make sure that we cover all 39 to 40 million Californians that we have. So we're looking forward to working together with everybody on that effort. Just a quick note, the Government Operations Agency, which is the umbrella organization over our census effort, has asked that I announce that they are starting to develop a funding formula that will inform, in part, the allocation of dollars to nonprofits and CBOs. In an effort to better inform this process, the agency will be releasing a request for information within the next few weeks, so please stay tuned. Whenever this is released, I will add it to the Assembly Committee's website, as well as announce it on social media, and I'm sure my colleague Senator Pan will as well on the Senate side. Really just want to thank everybody, all the participants, for joining us today, and lastly turn it over to Assemblymember Limón.
Thank you. I want to thank Chairs Pan and Chairs Berman for convening this. I think that the fact that you see two houses here, both Senate and Assembly, together with three different committees coming together is really important, because it emphasizes how much this issue means to the California legislature and to the state of California. So I want to thank all those who convened this, all those that worked on the committee, the staff, all of the presenters. Thank you for being here, from coming from all different places. I think your messages were loud and clear. We heard loud and clear that no one size fits all, that there needs to be flexibility, and that our approach has to be multifaceted, not just looking at municipalities or counties, but also CBOs and nonprofits altogether. We heard that it's important that we have coordination between these entities and that coordination has started. We also heard multiple times how important grants were versus contracts. You all did manage to coordinate that message well.
Message delivered.
As well as in making sure that California's investment is an investment that goes into existing efforts that have a proven track record. And I think that was important. We also know that there are certain areas of California that are hard to reach, and those areas include the Inland Empire, the Imperial County, Central Valley, rural communities, and fire-stricken areas. And I think that all of these messages, along with the multitude of details, are really going to help inform and move the conversation forward. I do want to, again, thank the chairs of the census committees in both houses for including the nonprofit sector in this conversation and allowing us to have a more robust discussion about how we move forward as a state. So thank you.
And with that, I just want to, a term that I learned that I hadn't used as much before, that I'm going to start using, uplift the comments of Assemblymember of Chair Limón about thanking our staffs, because there are 6 of us left up here on the dais, but only 3 of us did a lot of the work that led to today. The other 3 of us showed up. And so thank you very much to our staffs for the work they've done. And I know you'll continue to work with them as well as us. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.